All right, guys, and welcome back to Realize the Self. I'm Mark, and in today's episode, I'm going to go over another interesting concept called Loosh and how it relates to karma and Vadam Zeland's pendulums. So, in 1985, Robert Monroe discussed Loosh primarily in his book Far Journeys and later in Ultimate Journey as a metaphysical energy generated by living beings, especially humans through emotion and experience. He presented this as part of a exploratory narrative rather than a provable physical theory. And here's all the ways that Monroe said or strongly implied that human loosh or energy is harvested or generated based on his books, interviews, and lectures. So Monroe described loosh as emotional or spiritual energy produced by conscious beings early in Earth's development. He claimed higher, non-human intelligence is cultivated biological life to produce loosh. Over time, human emotional complexity became the richest source. Harvesting is not always portrayed as evil. In later books, he reframed it as part of a large-scale cosmic ecosystem of energetic exchange. And he came about all this information from doing out-of-body experiences, OBEs. So he's very, he's got a whole institute that's still around this day. I think it's the Monroe Institute, where you can learn how to have out-of-body experiences by listening to headphones, and I think it's binaural beats and doing these breathing and meditative exercises. So here's all the ways that Robert Monroe said loosh is generated or harvested. First off is intense emotional pain and suffering. This is the strongest loosh yield that comes from fear, grief, anguish, despair, loss, trauma. He repeatedly stated that deep suffering produces the densest, most potent loosh, which is fascinating because, as I mentioned previously, what's the news propagate over and over again? What social media propagate? Fear, grief, anguish, despair, loss, trauma. I mean, back in 2020, we had the biggest global traumatic event. And I dare to say that it wasn't for no specific purpose, that all that fear propagation was done for a reason, and quite possibly to harvest energy, produce more karma, or push that pendulum, whatever it is. There's something going on. And some of the examples that Robert Monroe gave that produces loosh, that produces those emotions, are war, disease, starvation, abuse, death of loved ones. Early Earth loosh farming focused heavily on predator versus prey terror and later evolved into human emotional suffering. This could be why Earth is set up as a predator versus prey ecosystem. If you go on in an African safari, you could see this displayed really well, with the lion chasing the zebra, and how that plays out. But okay, another way that loosh is produced, according to Monroe, is sexual and reproductive attachment. Excuse me. Not just sex itself, but obsessive desire, jealousy, longing, possessiveness, bonding through reproduction. These generate steady emotional loosh, especially when tied to romantic suffering or unrequited love or betrayal. And in this, I'll talk about this in a second. The third one is love, high-grade loosh. Later in his work, Monroe emphasized that unconditional love produces a much higher quality form of loosh. This is more refined, rare, and valuable than fear-based loosh. Love-based loosh is generated by parental love, sacrifice, compassion, deep connection, selfless service. This reframed the system as not purely parasitic, but part of a broader energetic economy. And then we go to number 4, conflict and competition. Loosh is generated through personal rivalry, power struggles, ego battles, social dominance games, political and ideological conflict, even low-level daily conflict. Workplace drama, relationship tension, online arguments produces continuous low-grade loosh. You just go on x.com and you could see this play out over and over again. People arguing back and forth, this and that, my view versus your view, you're wrong, I'm right. You can just see this. It's quite obvious. The fifth way, another way that Robert Monroe talks about loosh harvesting or production, is through physical pain and survival and struggle. Monroe said early life on Earth produced loosh via predator, terror, injury, starvation, environmental hardship. In human life, this continues through chronic illness, physical disability, accident, survival, stress. We could see this play out all around the world. There's still starvation going on. There's still people that in third world countries that can't access clean water and have enough food. I mean, just visiting India myself, I could see this firsthand, and it's it's atrocious to even see. It's unbelievable that soon we're going to have the first trillionaire, and yet we can't take care of that. And it's probably for a reason, and maybe Loosh, maybe not, but there's something more going on that we're not aware of. And so another thing that's quite interesting is the self, us, our true self. We're in a biological interface, a suit, the human body, and it's designed to break down. It's designed to feel pain. It's designed to age. It's designed to suffer. It's designed to get you to attach to that suffering, to get you to produce maybe more Loosh. Who knows if this theory holds true? Another way that Robert Monroe talks about is anticipation, anxiety, and dread. Not just bad events, but the anticipation of them. Worrying about death, fear of the future, financial anxiety, existential dread. This creates a long-lasting background field of Loosh protection. Another way Monroe talks about religious devotion and worship. This is huge, absolutely huge. How many people around the world do you see that worship, that pray, that do all this stuff? I mean, I went to India and I couldn't believe millions upon millions of people go to all these temples. They have all these prayers, and yet the gods that they worship aren't doing a damn thing for them. It makes you wonder, what is going on? Where is all that energy actually going? Is it being harvested? Is it Loosh? What is it? Who's feeding off that? Anyways, Monroe suggests that intense devotion, submission to gods, ritual, suffering, guilt, and repentance can also generate Loosh through emotional surrender, awe mixed with fear, shame, and self-judgment. This was one of his more controversial implications. Of course, when you have deeply dogmatic and held programs and beliefs related to religion, that's going to produce a lot of controversy. I mean, just people throughout the ages have died for going against these sort of programs and beliefs. And so this is actually why the knowledge of the self was the secret of all secrets and had to be kept hidden by these groups like the Sufis, the Gnostics, Vedic, Advaita Vedanta, all these groups, secret mystery schools of Egypt and Greece. So this stuff was kept secret for a reason, and it goes to say, like, how much of this should I even be talking about? And I'm not going to discuss everything in precise detail just because it could lead, to trouble or to misperception. And it already has with some of the messages I get about, this is, this goes against my religious foundation and beliefs. This is sacrilege, all that stuff. But anyways, we'll keep that for another topic. Another way Robert Monroe talks about Loosh: addiction and obsession. Loosh is generated by drug addiction, gambling, pornography addiction, compulsive behaviors, because they create cycles of craving, then a temporary relief, then shame, then craving again. This is what I talk about in the book, the cycle of pain and pleasure, the hamster wheel. So you get temporary relief, you get a little bit of pleasure from, let's say, compulsive gambling or a drug addiction. You get that high, and then you get this shame, and you get this intense craving and longing to keep that cycle over and over and over again until eventually you die. You're stuck. You need more and more and more. I know people who drink alcohol and they need more and more and more. They have problems after problems after problems, and they can't see themselves. This cycle of madness. And man's search for happiness, according to Ramana Maharshi, is man's unconscious search for the self. So all you need is self-realization, and you don't need any of that. All that temporary, minuscule happiness or pleasure or temporary relief is nothing compared to the bliss of the self. The bliss of all bliss, the happiness of all happiness is the self, is self-realization. Realize the self, and everything takes care of itself. Anyways, back to Robert Monroe. Another way he says Loosh is produces through mass events with high emotional charge. Large-scale harvesting occurs through wars, natural disasters, terror attacks, pandemics, revolutions. These create planetary-scale Loosh surges to desynchronize, due to synchronized mass emotion. And so that goes to a pandemic that we just had in 2020. You could see that in real time. People are still traumatized to this day and are still wearing masks and are still worried about a disease that happened, if it happened years ago. Number 10, everyday human attachment. Even normal life produces steady Loosh through family struggles, career ambitions, social status concerns, personal identity, conflict, aging, and mortality, illness. In later books, Monroe said Earth had become largely self-sustaining and Loosh production no longer needing overt manipulation. So that means it's self-sustaining. That means it's almost automatic, robotic. Makes you wonder if it's part of an AI simulation or something to that effect. Number 11, the moment of death. Monroe strongly implied that the emotional energy released at death, especially sudden or traumatic death, produces an intense Loosh discharge. Confusion, fear, and attachment at death all contribute to this enhanced Loosh production. This is separate from reincarnation mechanics, but definitely energetically linked. Yeah, reincarnation cycles are indirect harvesting. Monroe avoided saying souls are trapped, but repeated lifetimes equal repeated emotional production. Memory suppression increases the authenticity of the emotion. This creates long-term sustainable Loosh generation. Now, if you think about it, in the reincarnation cycle, Loosh production, our memories are wiped before coming to Earth. Have we come to Earth many, many, many times? What is the purpose of coming to Earth? Are we deceived into coming back to produce possibly Loosh? If this theory holds true, I cannot confirm nor deny, but it is definitely plausible. And from a matter of observational perspective, it seems to lean more towards this than not. I mean, there seems to be more evidence towards this than not. You could see in the world that the suffering has not been taken care of. Like I said, the fresh water and food for people around the world, they're almost suffering on purpose. Later on, Monroe talked about an ultimate journey. He softened the predator farm interpretation, and he suggests that early Loosh harvesting may have begun exploitatively at first, but evolved into a mutual exchange system. Humans also consume Loosh-like energy from others. So we all consume. It's a big Loosh consuming, energy consuming, food consuming food chain. And we're actually, maybe we're not the top of the food chain. Maybe there's someone else or something else, consuming us. Love-based Loosh is the most evolved form. So his final position was closer to Earth's not a prison farm, but a highly productive emotional energy ecosystem. And yeah, in summary, according to Monroe, Loosh is harvested through suffering, trauma, physical pain, survival, fear, sexual desire and attachment, romantic suffering, love and compassion, which produces high-grade Loosh, conflict and competition, anxiety and anticipation, religious devotion and guilt, addiction, obsession, mass emotional events, wars and disasters, pandemics, death, transitions, reincarnation-driven, repeated emotional lives. And so that's pretty much it. But an interesting concept too that we could go into, and I'd like to, even though this video would be a little bit longer than normal, is the concept of loneliness with Robert Monroe. So if we take the concept of the Gnostic concept of the demiurge and whatever you want to call it, Yaldabaoth or whatever the name is, putting the divine spark into a human body and disconnecting it from the self. And so this could be a form of loneliness, which Robert Monroe says produces the most potent form of Loosh. So loneliness makes you wonder, right? Anyways, so Monroe distinguished between crude loosh from fear, pain, shock, or terror, and then refined loosh, what he sometimes implied as the M or mature grade loosh, which is existential emotional states. Loneliness sits at the top of this refined category because it combines love, the capacity for connection, loss, absence of that connection, longing, desire for reunion, helplessness, the belief that reunion is impossible. That emotional blend creates what Monroe implied was a high-density, slow-burning, energetic output, not a spike like terror. He described it as persistent, self-renewing, deeply identity-based, not dependent on external crises. In other words, a frightened animal produces loosh once. A lonely human produces it constantly, often for decades. Loneliness doesn't require disasters. It runs silently in the background of an entire life. And so we're going to go down a little bit further. So how disconnection from the creator produces loneliness? Like I was saying, it didn't hit me until I was like putting these two ideas together, and I was like, wait a minute. The self is encapsulated into 5 or 7 different types of bodies, depending on how you want to look at it, or layers or sheaths, depending on how you want to look at it. And so that further disconnects us from the self, and then everything in society is trying to keep us outward, disconnected from the self. So then you add that to that Ramana Maharshi is the search for happiness is an unconscious search for the self. I'm like, wait a minute, something adds up here. In Robert Monroe's Far Journey is an ultimate journey. He describes a source, absolute creator state that is total unity, total knowledge, total belonging, non-dual. This describes the self, actually. From that state, he says, individual awarenesses are differentiated, these aspects, and enter increasingly dense reality systems. Here's a key point Monroe makes implicitly. Loneliness only exists when a being that once knew unity is made to forget. Let me read that one more time. Loneliness only exists when a being that once knew unity is made to forget. And that's deep. That's really deep. So loneliness is not just being alone, it's the emotional signature of forgotten unity. And that is the whole foundational concept of avidya or ignorance. We've just forgotten who we are. And that loneliness produces possibly loosh. Who knows? But that's deep. When consciousness forgets its origin, loses direct awareness of source, it's localized into an isolated identity, like a human self. It experiences separation, abandonment, searching without remembering what it's searching for. You're searching for the self. Realize the self. This is all you need to do. This is it. Anyone can do it. You can do it. Let's go. You can do it. Come on. The searching ache is the energetic condition that produces loosh. And so Monroe repeatedly emphasized that memory suppression is not a bug, it's actually part of the engine. Without a memory wipe, you would know where you came from. You would know reunion is inevitable. You would not experience existential loneliness. But with memory suppression, you feel abandoned without knowing by whom. You feel incomplete without knowing why. You seek connection in substitutes. Romantic partners, God figures, status, family, sexual bonding, social identity. None of these fully satisfy the original loss. Only the knowledge of the self will. So the system produces temporary connection to bring relief, followed by renewed emptiness, followed by deeper longing. This loop is exactly what Monroe described as a self-sustaining emotional energy generator. Importantly, this loneliness is not cured by being around people, not cured by success, not cured by religious belief, because its origin is pre-incarnational separation, not social isolation. Why loneliness is more valuable than fear or pain. Fear and pain are intense, short-lived, event-driven, and like we said, loneliness is continued identity-linked, existential, self-reinforcing, like a slow-burning candle. Monroe implied that this is why the system gradually shifted from the predator versus prey ecosystem to The human emotional identity suffering, which is now modern Earth. Loneliness does not require external violence. It turns consciousness against itself as a power source. Oof. Oof. That's, if there's any truth to this, this is deeply, deeply horrific. I don't know any other word to describe this, but the deceptive nature of this, if this is true, is, I don't see it in a positive manner, even though the self is neither positive or negative. Just this whole idea seems to be off. The creator Paradox Monroe noted, one of the most unsettling implications in ultimate journey is this: the creator both is the source of unity and permits the conditions of separation, because reunion produces even greater refinement of consciousness and Loosh. In simplified terms, unity is broken into individuals. Individuals forget unity. Forgetting causes loneliness. Loneliness generates the highest grade Loosh. Search for reconnection evolves the soul. Reconnection produces even higher grade energy than the loneliness itself. So loneliness is both the fuel and the pressure that forces evolution. This is why Monroe ultimately stopped framing Loosh harvesting as purely predatory. It is more like a painful growth engine built into the architecture of consciousness itself. And so, from Monroe's framework, chronic loneliness is not a personal failure, it's not a chemical imbalance, it's not a social defect. It is a structural feature of incarnated consciousness, the emotional echo of forgotten unity with the source or the self. This is also why meditation, direct mystical experience, out-of-body states, deep love without attachment, all temporary shut off the loneliness generated Loosh. They restore a felt sense of connection to the source, Brahman, the self, Atman. This is why Monroe stated, love-based Loosh eventually supersedes loneliness-based Loosh. Reunion yields a cleaner, non-suffering derived energy. And so, yeah, that's can be deeply disturbing for some people. It's not a great idea to ponder these for too long and marinate on it for too long. Just maybe see if it connects to any of your belief system, or if you gravitate toward any of this. And so, how to reduce the loneliness-based Loosh, according to Monroe: replacing separation identity with continuity identity. Loneliness exists because the incarnated self believes, I am only this body and this lifetime. Monroe taught that loneliness-based Loosh collapses when a person experientially, not intellectually, knows that they are more than the physical identity. Key shift from I am cut off from the self or source to I am temporarily focused here but never disconnected. Monroe put so much emphasis on out-of-body experiences, deep hemispheric synchronization meditations, direct non-physical perception. Once continuity is felt, not believed, the searching ache weakens, the creator disconnection narrative collapses, the Loosh output tied to existential abandonment drops sharply. You will still feel sadness, you will no longer feel cosmic abandonment. So this connects with self-realization to a large extent. Monroe made a very sharp distinction between attachment love, which is craving, fear of loss, and high loneliness Loosh, versus non-attached love, connection without ownership, refined Loosh, non-suffering based. Attachment says, I need you to fill a hole. Non-attachment love says, I share with you because I'm already whole. And when a human shifts from seeking relationships to cure loneliness to sharing love without requiring emotional rescue, the energetic output changes from loneliness Loosh to Loosh, love Loosh. Same heart center, entirely different energetic chemistry. This is why Monroe said romantic obsession is draining, but quiet compassion is energetically clean and stable. So even with self-realization, I'm not sure that, according to this theory, that you can get out of actually being an energy generator. At least you can theoretically leave the simulation or avoid reincarnation, and you could avoid suffering, but I'm not sure you can completely avoid being an energy generator or food for the system, theoretically. But we do what we can do, and that's the best we can do, is realize the self, and all else will take care of itself. So ending the substitution loop, according to Monroe, trying to replace the self or source or God, with romantic partners, sexual bonding, religion as fear, status, fame, belonging to groups, ideological identity. These give temporary relief, followed by deeper emptiness, followed by renewed craving. Monroe taught that the loop only breaks when a person stops demanding that life fill the cosmic gap. That's basically the self, that's what he's saying, and allows the gap to be consciously felt without panic, without substitution. This does two things energetically. It stops the oscillation cycle that produces steady loosh. This is exactly related to karma and the pendulums. It allows the underlying source connection to surface naturally. Paradoxically, fully allowing loneliness without trying to fix it dissolves the loneliness engine. That's perfectly well said. Do not react. Just allow, observe, do not react, do not attach, do not neither desire nor aversion, neither wanting nor not wanting. So he also talks about reconnecting to source directly, not symbolically. Monroe was clear that belief in God does not stop loneliness. Obedience to God does not stop loneliness. Worship often reinforces separation. Let's say that one more time. Worship often reinforces separation. What is the majority of the world doing? They are worshiping. What reduces loneliness, Loosh, is direct connection, not symbolic devotion. Self-realization is direct connection. You are that. You are everything. You are Tat Zvam Asi. You are that. And so a little more, last few sentences with Monroe. All temporarily restore pre-incarnational familiarity with unity, deep stillness, identity dissolution, wordless awareness, conscious presence. Loneliness disappears entirely during those states. Loosh output drops to near zero. A different energy exchange takes over. So this is self-realization. He's directly saying this, or indirectly, but referring to the same thing. Shifting from needing to be loved to actually being love. You are love. Sat Chit Ananda. Ananda is bliss. Bliss is love. You are that. The Sufis talk so much about love. Just read the Rumi. Just read stuff that Rumi. Love is the bridge between you and everything. I mean, love is it. But it's not earthly love, it's divine love. It's who you are. It's not attachment. It's not fear-based. It's not clinging. It's not possessive. It's who you are. It's love. When identity shifts to love is what I am expressing, the entire harvesting dynamic flips. No more internal vacuum, no more existential hunger, no more background ache. This does not require celibacy, isolation, asceticism, rejecting relationships. It only requires ending the emotional extraction from others, ending unconscious demand for completion. You still bond, you just stop feeding from bonds. And so that's about it for Robert Monroe. Well, there's actually one more. So what increases loneliness, Loosh? Making God into a distant authority figure, seeing Earth as a prison with no exit except death, defining themselves as fallen or unworthy, believing they must be rescued from outside, obsessive twin flames or soulmate ideologies. All these reinforce the separation and incompleteness. And you are not separate. You are complete. You are everything. And so one last little paragraph I want to talk about. Does self-realization end reincarnation, according, let's say, in Monroe's model? And let's see what he says about this. Monroe found 3 broad post-death pathways. So there's automatic recycling, the unconscious identity where you come back to Earth, reincarnated. According to the Upanishads, you go through the moon. The bright part of the moon, you go in. The dark side, you come back out, back to Earth. There's also, number 2, choice-based return. For those partially awakened, and you have a choice of coming back or not. And then the third one is function-based placement, where you're fully realized, which is interesting. For those realized, according to the Upanishads, you go out a portal or a gate through the sun. If you're not self-realized, you go to the moon to come back to Earth. If you are self-realized, you leave through the sun, which acts as a gate or a portal according to the Upanishads. Self-realization does not, according to Monroe, does not automatically stop reincarnation. What it does instead is you are no longer compelled by unconscious emotional gravity. You are no longer pulled back by unresolved attachment. You now operate from choice instead of reflex. Some realized beings choose to reincarnate, remain as non-physical aids, move into other reality systems entirely. So reincarnation ends as a trap, but not necessarily as a function. So there you go. So we just went over recently 3 different ideas or philosophies tying in this reincarnation, karma, pendulums, loosh, energy harvesting, and they all seem to interrelate and overlap quite nicely. So I'd say just go over the data, go over the writings, go over all this and see what you think. I mean, don't let anyone tell you what's true for you. All I can say is realize the self. Just realize the self, and everything take care of itself. Always remember, you are that. You are everything. You are boundless, ineffable, timeless, Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss, the bliss of all bliss, happiness of all happiness, the love of all loves. You are that. You are everything. Never forget this. Don't let anyone ever tell you that you're not, or at least don't believe that, because you are more than you think. And that's actually a fact. Anyways, thank you for being here.